All right, so it looks like it's about time to turn over the floor for our next talk. So I know that with VuFind 5, everyone let out a collective sigh of relief that we didn't drastically revamp the user interface again, because that's always kind of a pain to catch up with. So Chris is here to depress you all with thoughts of the challenges ahead, but hopefully also with some exciting new ideas. So take it away, Chris.
Depressing. I'm actually hoping to more inspire and challenge. As I'll get into in a second, this is really my most radical ideas, which is very exciting and also disappointing that all of my most radical ideas can barely fit a half-an-hour time slot. But for posterity and for those of you on the stream who may not know me, I'm Chris Hallberg. I am the lead front-end developer for VuFind. And I'm to blame for any of the out-of-the-box stylings of the themes, anything in the themes that is broken or doesn't work, or all the things that work very well, like the lightbox, which is still working after years. I'm still very happy with that. There's a lot of really exciting technology these days that I really think we can bring into VuFind, and I'm really looking forward to not doing any of these joke ideas, but hopefully breaking the ice, because I've started to realize a pattern of VuFind development. I'll leave this up a little bit. A pattern of VuFind development that I want to capitalize on, which is we're about to swing into the next phase, as David just mentioned. We didn't do anything extremely breaking or damaging. Everyone can still use the theme and take advantage of the new stylings. But we are getting to the next stage of the possibility. We are on the right side right now, where we made non-breaking style changes with the new sandal theme, which continues the tradition of not only foot-related puns and shoe-wear-related puns, but also uses all the templates, or almost all the templates, of Bootstrap, so that way, if you're using Bootstrap, you can switch over to take advantage of the styling. But we're about to swing back to the next phase, which is updating the templates, which is a breaking change, but allows for a lot more larger possibilities. So I think the real title of this talk should be The Panic-Inducing Possibilities of VuFind's Future Front-End Development. And I'm painting a picture of a flying city here. These are ideas that I would love to see that maybe need to be incorporated slowly, but if we are going to break things, let's break things that allow us to not break things for a longer period of time, get as up-to-date and feature-pressing as possible. There's a lot that I've seen in discussion that we agree upon. We want things to be modern, we want things to be lighter, we want things to be faster, we want there to be more control. There's a bigger push for accessibility these days, best practices. So how we go about this is obviously going to be a discussion, and I'm hoping to start that discussion today. So here's what I'm actually going to talk about today. Out with the old, what we can do to improve while we're going through the process of making these radical changes, and in with the new. What can we bring to VuFind that will make it much better going forward? So starting with out with the old, where the opportunities are to cut bloat, to increase flexibility, and of course, make it easier to customize all of these interfaces. And I'm going to start with the one that I think will have the most discussion revolving around it, based on what I saw from the German conference, was dropping Bootstrap. I think it might be time to drop Bootstrap. It was a really good choice at the time for accessibility, for responsiveness, and it was a really good choice overall to give people a lot of tools out of the box, like modals and collapsing facets and things like that. But it's very, very, very heavy. It's a very large package, and we're still using Bootstrap 3, which is basically considered out of date at this point, and it goes against a lot of best practices. And a lot of native browsers styling with CSS3 can replace most of these things with a lot smaller components, like the entire column system. We've already replaced with flex columns, which is not only much lighter and simpler, but much more controllable and gives us more freedom. There was a talk, I think it was 3 years ago, at Code for Lib, that was talking about rolling around Bootstrap. And if it was feasible then and encouraged then, it's definitely feasible now. There's lots of new components. There's one I've been using a lot in my own project called Micromodal, which has all the features of the Bootstrap, the Bootstrap modal but is much more accessible right out of the box and much more easy to style and use. And also the W3, who makes all the standards of accessibility, provide example CSS and JavaScript for almost any component you'd want to add. So if we don't have accordions or anything in VuFind, it's very easy to find something that's extremely accessible and use it right out of the box. Now, to be clear, the notes from the German conference point to the opposite of this. A lot of institutions are looking towards to use Bootstrap 4. It is much cleaner. It's much easier to customize, much easier to style. It's better. But I'm still going to propose dropping Bootstrap, because the idea of a pure Bootstrap theme was what Bootstrap 3 was when we made it. It was as close to a pure Bootstrap style thing with as little custom styling as possible on top of it, which led to problems like the 2 search boxes, which has been now a famous problem with the front end. So I'm not against Bootstrap 4, but I can guarantee that the one way to make Bootstrap 5 come out is to release a Bootstrap 4 VuFind theme. As you can see, this is from the GitHub for Bootstrap. Don't get too excited, I'm just capturing new ideas here. But it's there, and it will come out the week after we launch the Bootstrap 4 theme, I promise. Speaking of dropping bloat, I think it might be time to drop jQuery. This was the standard for a very, very long time, but I've seen this kind of go on the wayside for the same reasons, is that the native JavaScript support in browsers now takes a lot of the most useful and most commonly used features, namely the selectors, using the $ selector versus query selector all. This allows browsers to have their own optimization and cuts a lot of code, and also the class control. There's now classless, which is supported in all the major browsers, and again, it gives browsers the chance to optimize it, directly controlling the tree. I think it might be better. And it might reduce dependency differences. It's one less thing to update, and it's also one less thing to worry about. We were just working with someone who's still on jQuery version 1, while jQuery version 3 is out there in the wild. So that using browser native code might reduce like clashes and problems with updating as well. And finally, one thing I want to do for a while is I want to remove as much styling as possible. I want whatever new theme comes out, whatever progressive theme, to be as least styled as possible. Just enough in there to normalize it, make it look the same in every browser, make it look, presentable out of the box, with making sure all the forms are nice and neat and accessible. But for the most part, I want it to be a blank slate. So this involves a lot of different things, removing a lot of the opinions and strong stylings, maybe things don't look as super beautiful out of the box, but people are doing amazing things with their own customization anyway. So make sure it looks nice, but not super opinion out of the box. And that's going to rely on a good CSS reset, which is make sure everything looks the same in all the browsers, and adding enough really good classes in there, which I'll get into in a second. So if you do want to customize it, it's very easy to have that kind of control. It's also going to involve making more reusable classes in the frameworks Tailwind or Tachyons are really great libraries that allow you to customize the entire interface by reusing many classes over and over again. So there's a class that makes backgrounds gray. There's a class that makes the font bigger. So not on the level of these, but have more of those reusable components in there. So what can we do while we're actually going through any of these processes? Where can we reduce and where can we refactor? Something that's been coming for a long time is I want to go through every single template, which I haven't done since I made the Bootstrap 3 theme, and completely try to rewrite it and bring it up to date. There's been a call for a long time to break things like the side facets and the search pages and everything into smaller, more reusable chunks, create more common UI things, like make its own pagination page, make a new tabs page, like template that you can use as a partial anywhere. And also use this opportunity to merge together more ideas from the community. I know that what's it called? I can't think of it right now. The Beluga? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Beluga. I'm sorry if that's incorrect. But there's a lot of great ideas there that have been kind of slowly washing up on the shores of VuFind. But going through every single template will allow us to bring a lot of those great changes over as well, and might allow us to solve some of the differences between what the German libraries need and what the US libraries need, because there's different ideas of what data you present on the front page and what data you present in the search results, that making it much easier to customize smaller chunks might be good. There's a danger here of making too many small chunks, and then it becomes even harder. We'll find a good balance for it. One of the things I really want to do is improve accessibility. There's a lot of HTML5 elements out there that make it much easier for screen readers to go through everything. We're using not nearly as many ARIA attributes, sorry, ARIA, as we really should. And we could use things a lot more screen reader friendly outlining to make sure we use the headers properly, make sure we use the right elements to make sure everything is good, because we can style anything to look like anything. You know, so like a table can look like a free-form div arrangement, but if it's more accessible, that's good. But also make sure that the code, if we're going through every template, is easier for developers to read as well. The indenting on the templates is always completely wild because we're trying to match up the HTML and the PHP. We're going to have to figure something out for that. More on that, the code styling, we can standardize some things. Right now we're using 2 space indents for CSS and JavaScript, but 4 space for PHP, and that goes into the templates. But like standardizing thing across, make sure everything's really readable. Make sure we do some smart things like having classes, but any JavaScript that changes like status things, you can prefix it with JS dash, which is one of the new standards that I've seen and excuse me, become quite a fan of. But it hasn't been time to do these large changes yet. So in with the new. So here's where I take what we've been building on in this talk so far and what we've been doing good so far, and I try to take it to the next level, looking towards the future. So starting with radically accessible results. There was a talk, it was last year at Code for Lib, from Catherine Diebel, sorry if that's a mispronunciation. I have a link to the talk at the end of this presentation. But she proposed using tables in the search results, which is like, what? Like any web developers, that's like, it seems like a step back from all the progress we've made in HTML and CSS, but there's still nothing out there that beats the accessibility of it. You can, by using table headers and row headers, you can find exactly the information you're looking for. So when you look at a search result, you can easily pick out what year it published, you know, who wrote it, where, everything like that. But it's much harder when you're going through a page of 20 of these to have it read, every single bit of information, every single book being read to you. Trying to figure out some kind of table thing, this might be a hackathon project of mine, just to try this out. It was a really good idea. It seems to be a really great way to go forward. There's other weird things too, like the W3 recommends using definition lists, which I've never seen used for accordions, but if it makes it more accessible, it really should be worth a shot, even if it kind of doesn't use the latest and greatest technology, but still the best thing for our users. And vision, you know, people who have vision impairment get a huge benefit, and people who can see normally and read the screen, if I'm using not the correct sensitive terms, I'm very sorry, can't tell the difference. I don't see any harm in that. This screenshot is actually of a table that's been styled and looks just like, if not better than, the current results that we have in VuFind. I also want to bring more JavaScript and things to the front end. So not quite React. I had React on the joke slide. I don't think VuFind's in a place, I'm not sure if it will be, to fully go with a React-style full JavaScript interface. But there's a lot of ideas about React that we can bring in, such as reducing more complex template areas with JavaScript. So like just leave a placeholder and fill it in with JavaScript. Might be a way to increase customization if we can find a way to do, like, use good templates for that, find the right way to do it. The 3 things that come to my mind is record comments. Just pull those out and have them completely loaded with JavaScript. So there's no HTML in the templates about that, or there's a template on the side that makes it very easy to do that. Record status in the search results, another great place, I think. And then maybe the entire sidebar filters. Those templates in the sidebar have been tackled many times, and they get simpler, air quotes simpler. But I think there's ways that we can go to make it much easier if we almost completely strip out the PHP, HTML, replace it with a JavaScript solution. I'm not saying this is the solution for a lot of things, but we should consider being a little bit more JavaScript heavy now that we've dropped to non-JavaScript support, and now that the percentage of browsers that are fast enough to handle, loading in 20 divs or tables into search results is not a problem. So there's an opportunity here, if we do it right, to increase customization as well. We're gonna have to figure out the right way to do it. And it might be time to do JavaScript updates to bring everything up to date. There's a few ideas that I have in mind. The first one being upgrade to the latest version of JavaScript, use classes, so that way we can have a good way to represent the data. Right now, we kind of are using CSS classes and hidden elements to hide all the crucial data. We should probably use data attributes instead. And if we make like a record class and we load all the data into record classes, it might be really easy to do custom JavaScript that takes that data, does more interesting things with it, and might make any changes from the last slide might easier to do. So like making the data more organized in the JavaScript might be a really great way to allow customization and more control. But not everything. Like the lightbox is still a singleton. We still have the VuFind object, which I think is still the right way to go. It's not like the ES6. It's not an ES6 class, but it's just one of those. There's not going to be multiple versions of those. But also, I think we should switch to something more like Prettier. And I know that Prettier formatting sounds like, oh, let's make it nicer. But Prettier.js is a opinionated, really fast formatting tool that can completely format. I tried it in the VuFind JavaScript and it took like 12 milliseconds. It's extremely fast. It's built into a lot of editors now, like add-ons. So it might be the way to go to kind of make things, make the code organized and nice. It is opinionated, so maybe you might find some time to find the right settings to make sure everyone's happy and that it's readable enough. I personally think that the default line limit length is too small. So things like that. But this might help with a lot of issues that JSLint and ESLint always catch, of just missing things like that. And heck, maybe we can even be open to maybe some TypeScript or some Flex, some kind of typing in there. I didn't really put a lot of thought into that, but some kind of automated reformatting of the JavaScript and CSS might keep everything very readable and accessible without going crazy, and also make any changes that we make to the overall formatting very quick. So I am going to take some questions, so I'll look in the chat. Maybe Damien can hop on my laptop and check on the Twitter. But while people put in their questions, if you're also watching and you want to submit a question on Twitter, the hashtag is now VuFind18, not 2018. I noticed that the German conference was using that, so I think we should make one single place for all those. So if you want to ask a question on Twitter or in the chat, I'm going to check the chat on Zoom in a second. And also we have the Google Docs if you want the discussion to go further. But first, a few that I pulled from the German conference that I wanted to answer while I had the opportunity. Why is there code for both Less and CSS? This was to allow people who wanted to use Sass to do so. So VuFind, I develop it in Less, but I make sure that every minor release that we port everything over to SCSS. So if you want to use that, you're more than welcome to. And I will continue to do that. It's not any burden on me. I like using Less. Sass is not significantly different. If we want to combine them together or pick one of those solutions, that's fine. There's also a new kid on the block, Post CSS, which I personally really like because it's very modular. So maybe I can just use what I need for VuFind, which is mostly nesting and variables. But if you want some more advanced, usage like color changers, you can pull in your own module and use that as well. So that might be a good way to lighten it, make it very readable, make it very more unified, so that it's much easier to get things going. Because I know that if you're working with Sass and you want to contribute things, you have to convert it back to Less, and there's no workflow for that because we're just going one way. So open discussion about that. And the last question I have in my slides is, are the barriers for entry low enough for new installers? And I agree with Damien that no, they're not. They can always be better. The amount of configuration that we have right now is daunting, and I'm not just talking about the INI configs. The way that you configure hierarchy and inheritance among the themes is something that's been working for a long time, but as I started to develop Less themes and a Less workflow, it became clear that maybe there's a new way to go about this. So if there's going to be a new approach, if anyone has a really good solution for this, you know, if we're going to do some radical breaking changes, it might be time to do that. So I believe I have about 5 minutes left. It looks like I've gone about, I'm not sure how behind schedule we are or whatever, but if anyone has any questions, I'm going to poke around the different interfaces here to see if I can answer as many questions as possible. But please put any discussions you have into either the Google Docs or send them at me directly so we can bring them up during the road mapping, and I can try out a couple crazy ideas during the hackathon. So if anyone has any questions, I'm going to start looking for them now. Here's the link to, it's blue. That's hard to read, but I put my slides up on the Google Docs, so if you want to click through, you can just go to the Google Doc that way. There was something in the chat. Let me see if I can, that was a question. It was a scheduling question as far as I can see. Okay. Were there any other questions on the Google Doc team or on Twitter? Or?
Not that I'm seeing.
Okay. Did anyone here have any questions or comments or radical ideas since we have the time?
I have a question.
Yes.
So do you have any idea of what browsers or which versions you would be targeting when getting rid of all the old crap and bringing the new era in?
I think we recently made the adjustment, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we recently dropped IE 8, so we're on IE 9 and up. And what I've looked at for usage, that might be enough to do almost all the changes I have in mind. But I know that IE 11 and the latest version of Edge support every idea that I've proposed so far. Their usage there is greater than like the existence of IE 10, 11, and the lower versions of Edge. So I'm not sure if there's going to be a huge change in the support, but I think it might be time to do that. I think the usage for IE 9 is like 0.12% or something like that. So like anything that gets left behind is in such a small minority that maybe we should consider, you know, we'll make a better consideration of what we actually support going forward. But the one thing I know that we do right now is that CSS Flex isn't supported in some of the older browsers, but there's a really easy way to pull that in with like a fallback CSS. So when I see that, like using that might still be a good way to go forward. And of course, if we're going to be radical and we want to just support like only Chrome, just to be intentionally radical, yeah, I think we can consider that. But everything I propose is supported except for I think mobile Opera, which is like, okay, that's fine. So.
Yeah, another comment maybe. I think most of what you were showing is or thinking about doing is sounds good, but I think it shows a lot of courage to drop jQuery and do it natively, because there are still some gotchas with the browsers.
Yeah, and I'll take a look at that. I'll have to see. I'll look more closely at what jQuery 3 is and does. But as far as I know, the two most used features, the selector and the class things, are supported natively in most browsers. But yeah, that's something that I'm considering. But if it's doing a lot of work to standardize things behind the scenes that I don't know of, maybe we can replace it with like a JS reset, the way that we have a CSS reset. But yeah, I'll look more closely into it.
I would probably add the Ajax calls to that list, at least. Yes.
Yeah, I know that fetch is like the new standard for that. That makes it almost as easy as jQuery Ajax. But that's really mostly only supported in Firefox and like the latest version of Chrome. So that might not be a good way to go. But I already, in my own testing on the side, I changed all the Ajax in the Lightbox code to native calls, and it didn't change all that much. So it was actually not a huge headache to get that working. So, but yeah, that's another good thing. I should write that down as a consideration. I left my notebook by Damien. So I will write that down.
Chris, this is Leela. I got a question for you. In terms of maybe reopening the Dockerization PR, I wonder if that's one way to increase accessibility, is giving some sort of like drop in place that also has improved information about how to customize and things like that. Maybe making a package that's a drag and drop type of thing to get people started. I don't know. It just something to think about maybe, and maybe put on the roadmap later on.
Yeah, definitely. That would definitely be a good way to start. And that reminds me, when we were talking about making improvements to the VuFind website,
Mm-hmm.
it might be time to do a showcase of themes that people want to share their custom themes. Like, oh, we used all the templates of Bootstrap 3, but here's the CSS we put on top of it that makes it look stunning. Being able to have a place that people can showcase those, that people, oh, I like this theme, I want to start here, as opposed to starting with, you know, what I come up with. I think that'd be a really good way too. That, yeah, if you can launch a Docker instance easily, and in the configs, drop a file in and change the one line of the config to make it look as beautiful as this presentation looks, which is like the same thing. I downloaded the template and used it. Bringing that kind of workflow to VuFind is definitely a way to increase developer accessibility.
Yeah, I like it.
Look, I think a couple minutes. So if you have any more comments, put them in the Google Doc. Let's get some action going there. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it back over to Damien.